of our regular guests has a theory, because I'm talking about, like, I read about all this money. He's like, well, how much money you have? And I'm like, spend it all on books. You know, like, and so and he's like, yes, my economics teacher in college drove like a '83 Honda. You know what I mean? Like they have all this knowledge of money, but they don't have the money.
Now, was that in 1985 that he drove a 1983?
Yeah. You're an economist, like, around the world, talking about I want to figure that out, because that is another thing that for some reason I've read 15 different books on, and I still know nothing. You know, I've tried to read Ludwig Moses and Hazlitt, like to read the what's that group of people?
The Austrians?
The what? No, well, that's the Austrian, but it's the political ideology of libertarians, yes. Uh-huh. So that's sort of the libertarian economic philosophy. I've tried to read Jeffrey Sachs and Friedman, everybody, you know what I mean? Somehow I've went down that path too, and I feel like I know nothing. So I'm excited. I was like, he's an economist too? I got so much I want to talk about.
Are you an economist?
Yes, that's my professional training.
What's your history? When did you find your interest in philosophy, Stoicism, things like that?
Well, I guess I'm a person of broad interests. So I grew up in Spain, and in Spain, philosophy was a required course on your 11th and 12th grade. So I had a couple of courses, high school classes then, but I probably was interested even before then. So I guess I don't remember not being interested in philosophy. Okay. It would be the right answer. Yeah.
I never remember being interested in it, to be honest. Like, I remember taking a class in college on philosophy, and at that point, I didn't really care. It was interesting to be like, because it was a lot of questioning of God in the first place, which I'd never really done. But I didn't really think about it, you know? And then I started reading different religions, and somehow those started to connect for me, you know? But what do you do? I will get back to that, but I want to talk about what. So that's been your profession all along, as being an economist?
Yes. I did my undergraduate and graduate work in economics, and I've been a practicing economist all my professional life. I ended up working in the credit union industry, which it's a nice industry to be in. Their slogan is "People helping people."
Is it people helping people?
Well, that is the slogan, and I do believe that we do live out the mission.
I actually bank with a credit union because I don't trust banks. What's the main difference between a credit union and a bank?
Well, we'll talk about whatever you guys want. I didn't come here to put a plug for my industry.
No, I just happen to be one of the few people in the world that's interested in this.
I'm delighted to talk about credit unions. That's what I do all day. I hang out with Neil often just to escape work, but I'm happy to talk a little about work.
Okay.
You're making the cheesemaker make cheese when he gets home. Come on.
But the main difference is that banks or commercial banks are owned by stockholders who are external to the financial intermediation process. The financial intermediation process, to put it very simply, is some people have too much in savings. They don't know what to do with it very well, and there are people that don't have enough money, and they take a loan. Basically, you could do it directly. As a saver, you could lend money to someone, and they pay you interest. Or it turns out that that's complicated because you don't know whether they're going to pay you back. You don't know how quickly you're going to get the money back. So it turns out that it is convenient for most of us to not engage in that process directly, but to go through an intermediary like a bank.
Right.
And so the bank does the figuring out of who should get the loan and the interest rate, and they take care of the payments. But in essence, the borrower pays interest, and a large chunk of the interest goes to the saver.
Right.
So the difference between a credit union and a bank is that a bank is owned by external parties, stockholders, that set up shop, and they tell borrowers and tell depositors, come here, and they keep a cut.
Right.
A credit union, the idea is to cut out the middleman and basically the borrowers and the depositors own the credit union. So instead of having to pay dividends out to stockholders, that amount of dividends gets distributed to both the borrowers through slightly lower rates and to depositors through slightly higher rates.
And they're still protected by the federal deposit insurance, right?
Yes, the federal deposit insurance was introduced in the United States in the 1930s. It was, it's a complicated matter. Other countries didn't do it during the Great Depression, and one could argue that their financial systems worked just as well without deposit insurance. But we did introduce it in the United States in the 1930s. Credit unions were doing just fine without it, but in the early 1970s, they decided, okay, we want it too. And there are two separate federal government agencies, two federal funds backing up deposits at banks, and a separate one backing deposits at credit unions. But yes, they're both federally insured.
Do the credit unions also have the ability to do the fractional reserve banking where they can just create money out of thin air?
Yes. Yeah.
Huh. How is that, as an economist, is that general all over the world of just making up money out of thin air and it not really being real? Is that a thing that happens everywhere, or does it happen more here or under capitalism?
Well, I see you've read a good bit of Austrian economics, and you have the concerns that people that read that literature have. But fractional banking, as it's called, is a standard thing in banking planet-wide.
Right.
And there is risk involved in it, just like there is risk in driving a car, but there are benefits to driving a car. Right. And we all do it even though there's risk. You can drive a car more safely, you can put safeguards, you can debate whether the government should require safety belts or not. Similar issues arise with banking. Fractional reserve banking involves risks. The risk that everybody decides, I want all my money back. And the bank doesn't have it, the credit union doesn't have it because it's lent out.
Right.
It's just,
7 times over.
10 times over. At one point in time, it was 20 times over.
Wow.
But you can debate whether the free market would do a good job in ensuring that banks can engage in that activity safely, or whether the government should be involved in it or not.
Right.
And there are various safeguards, but the risk's still there. And every 10 to 20 years, we have recessions or financial crises in which people get worried, and for whatever reason, they test the solidity of our financial system, and people try to take their money out.
It looks like that's what's happening right now. I don't really like FTX, a Bitcoin exchange that set itself up to be like a bank of Bitcoin, where people, and they had a run on people trying to get their money out, and they don't have it. You know what I mean? And that's what's happening to them, and none of that's insured through regulation or whatever. Yeah. So is that sort of what you're talking about? What's happened to the banks over the years, and it's just transferred over to this new technology?
Well, I don't know how much I want to talk about crypto. I'm not a big fan,
okay.
so it'd be hard for me to talk about crypto long without bringing up.
Hey, it's okay to have negatives about it. We all should.
Yeah, to me, it brings up the greater fool's theory that people put their money in and it goes up. Everybody's excited until everybody wants to take it out, and then it plummets in value. So the last person to put their money in loses. So there are some parallels with the banking system, but I think the parallels are slight.
Right. You don't feel like Bitcoin is like Bitcoin or any of those coins work as a standard of value?
I have absolutely no doubt that they do, that Bitcoin does not.
Okay.
A standard of value should be something that has constant purchasing power over time. Bitcoin does not. Its value goes up and down like crazy all the time. So, it might be that it's a good speculative vehicle for somebody if you buy low and you have the lack of selling high. But it's not something that you can decide, I'm going to value this car at 7 Bitcoins because there's no telling what price you'll end up
Right.
get in for it.
But you could say the same thing with gold, couldn't you? Like it's like the gold is is that's why we're not tied to gold anymore. Is anybody still tied to gold in the world?
Yeah, no one's tied to gold, but the idea with gold back in the day was that, well, to get gold off the ground, you have to mine it, and it's hard to mine it.
Right.
So that establishes some assurance that it's not going to, no one can print gold easily. You can mine it. And if prices go up, then back historically, when prices went up, people mined more gold, and that increased the supply, and that lowered that brought a stability to it. Or if prices went in the other direction, people might mine less gold.
Right.
I remember visiting a mine where they were telling us, oh, the price of gold right now is at 700. I don't remember the
And it
number.
costs them more to get it out of the ground.
Yes, and they basically said, we're ready. When the price of gold goes up, I think the price of gold was 400 then.
Right.
And they said, if it goes up to 700, we'll start mining. But so, that brought a little stability to gold. The other thing that happens is if the whole system is based on gold, then that created more stability for gold. The other thing to know is that gold itself was a historical rarity as a way to back a financial system.
Right.
Historically, what most countries used to back commodity-backed currencies was silver. It turns out that silver is more abundant, silver is easy to mine. So from the year, I read this somewhere, I don't have the citation, from the year 2500 BC, 500 BC to the year 1900, the price level planet-wide was more or less stable in terms of silver. So if you wanted to buy a chicken in the year 500 BC, or if you wanted to buy a chicken in the year 1900, in terms of how much silver you had to give up, it was pretty much the same.
Oh, okay.
And this pops up in interesting places. You were mentioning religion. There are these expressions that we all have, these stories that we know that we don't know where they go back to. So, for instance, when Judas gets compensated for turning over Jesus in the New Testament,
right,
he gets given 30
shekels or whatever.
I think most translations of the Bible say 30 pieces of silver.
Oh, okay.
But the original, it's what you said. It was 30 shekels, and the shekel. Today, it's the currency of Israel, but the shekel is simply a unit of weight of silver.
Oh, I didn't even know it was the currency of Israel. That's pretty neat that it's tied all the way back to...
Yeah, they kept the name, but it has no link to silver anymore. But the number 30 comes from somewhere in the Bible, Leviticus or something like that. There's somewhere that it says, if you kill somebody's slave, you have to compensate him. And you compensate him by giving them 30 shekels. So when in the Bible, the religious leaders are compensating, are paying Judas, what they're doing is they're putting Jesus down by saying, and he's not worth more than a slave.
Oh, okay.
But the point of this story, which I've derailed myself, the point of the story is that you might think 30 shekel, is that a good price for the compensation of killing somebody's slave? For over time, should the Bible update itself and have the price go up and down? You might debate whether God is omniscient or omnipotent, and he knew what the price was always going to be. But separate from that, from a monetary history point of view, prices were widely stable in terms of silver, so the issue did not arise.
Right.
But I've derailed myself 300 times. A key point to this story is that if you wanted to have a commodity-backed currency standard, people have tried to do it over the millennia, silver is a far better bet than gold. At some point in I don't remember what century it was, in the 1800s or the 1900s, a few countries decided, oh, gold is prettier and gold is fancier. So let's switch our currency from being backed by silver to being backed by gold.
Is that what the decision was based on? It was based on the look
It's not, it's not about like what you said about, because my understanding of silver is, yes, it could be a good store of value, but like you said, there's so much of it.
The prices were stable.
Price will they'll stay where they are.
Yeah, but they basically thought, okay, gold is worth more, and it's prestigious. Let's have our currency systems based on gold.
Oh, okay.
And empirically, it was not a good bet because countries that had a gold standard have more unstable price levels than countries that had silver-backed systems.
Huh.
This is my vague reading. I'm not a monetary historian.
Right.
I'm just, I know a lot about credit unions. Let me go ahead and say this clearly for the rest of the episode. I know a lot about credit unions and I speak with authority. The other stuff I've read about, I claim no
Oh, me either.
authority.
I've read all this stuff. I have no idea. I have no idea what it is. But because like we were talking earlier, it depends on sort of what I'm reading at the time. I really give a lot of credence to whatever I'm reading at the time. You know, it's weird. I don't go like, this is crap. I do ask questions and write in the margins, but you know, I'll read Naomi Klein and be like, man, capitalism has ruined the world, right? And then I read Howard Bloom pointing out all what capitalism has done and how it's pushed evolution forward just in the couple hundred or however many years it's been around. It's pushed us further than all of evolution did before that, you know. So there's, again, good and bad, you know. So I've tried to take it in to try to understand it, and I just don't. I just can't get my head around money because I feel like it's based on nothing. So it's hard to give it any.
Money is just a medium of exchange that makes our lives easier.
So how does Bitcoin not do that? If there's one standard that's tied to it, there's only a specific amount of it, it's not regulated by any government, and economically speaking, when you get down to where we all agree on what is the store of value, that cuts out a lot of inefficiency within economic systems around the world, being able to interact with one another and blah, 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 that leads to inefficiency in the economic model. And then if we had one that sort of was the core of all of them.
Well, it turns out that defining and figuring out what money is not as easy as it looks.
Isn't that weird? That we base our lives around? Like,
yeah.
I'm convinced money is really our God. It's what we worship. It's what we work for. It's what we believe in. It's what we want to have. It's what we work hard to obtain. And so to my definitions of God, that is really what it's the most important thing to us.
Well, it also turns out that people use the word money to mean different things. So in the textbooks, you could call it the Forrest Gump definition. Money is as money does. So what is money? Money is something that serves the functions that we want from money. And
purchasing power.
I haven't thought about it in a while, so I may not remember all of them. I'm getting the right order. But the functions that something that we call money should serve is whether it's a store of value, meaning that if you get it, what we call money, and you hold it for a while, you will have the same purchasing power in a while. So tomatoes are not a good store of value,
right,
because they rot. A cow might be a better store of value, so forth. Then it's a medium of exchange. It's something that if you have that thing that we call money, you can readily give it to someone and they'll accept it easily,
as value,
no matter where you go, without undue complications. Another one is store of value, medium of exchange, and then another one is unit of account, meaning that people can easily price things in terms of it in a way that is useful, and that is somewhat linked to the store of value one. So, are our green pieces of paper perfect money? Maybe they are, maybe they're not. Maybe we can do better. Maybe we can experiment. Maybe we can have monetary reform. But when you compare it with Bitcoin, the green pieces of paper that we have, with all of their problems, with the inflation that we have had in the last year of, at 1.9.1%, they do a heck of a lot better job than Bitcoin.
Right.
Because Bitcoin that does not serve as a medium of exchange, because I will say
it's inefficient.
It is very hard to go to the grocery store and convince people to accept Bitcoin.
Right.
So it's not money in that sense.
Well, it's hard to convince people to take silver or gold too.
And that's why that's why silver and gold today are not money.
Right.
They are commodities that at different points in history served as money. Today they are not money. They are beautiful metal.
They started as serving as money, and then they became the standard, like what things were based on. And so I wouldn't give you a coin. I would translate that coin into dollars, and then I keep that and I give you the dollars, and then you spend those dollars. Right?
Yeah, the historical development of money is interesting and complicated, but I mean, for a long time, people would, figure out what was readily exchangeable. So, for instance, the ancient, I think it's the Aztecs used, I think it's cocoa beans.
Yeah, that people have used all different things, shells, whatever, until they find.
In concentration camps, people use cigarettes. People use whatever they need.
Right.
But around, I think it's 700 BC, around somewhere in Turkey, I think it's called Lydia or something like that. Somebody came up with the idea of, we all are using gold all the time, or silver, or whatever it was. Some government authority decided we're going to cut it into these little discs of constant weight.
Right.
And that's when the first coins appear. And, those things were pretty successful. And they were pretty successful for, for close to 2,400 years. And we still use coins. They don't have silver.
They started to cut them with less and less, like a drug dealer, making it less silver, but still, that was their version of inflation and creating money out of nothing, right?
They, instead of having 100% silver, they would have a smaller and smaller percentage. But the history is interesting, and we keep traditions. If you pull out a quarter, you may, and I don't know if you have one in your pocket. You may. Do you have one in your pocket?
I can't believe that I do, but I had to pay parking.
Okay, so look at the edge and tell me whether it's smooth or whether it's ridged.
I'm going to guess that it's ridged. It's ridged.
Do you know why it's ridged?
It's so you couldn't take pieces off of the side.
So that if you try to shave off,
it would be obvious.
It would be obvious. So that's why that's ridged. Now, in today's quarter, it doesn't matter.
Right.
But back in the day, it mattered. And the reason why there's a face on either side is the same idea. So that you can't obviously shave off. Because if you got 100 silver pieces and you did it enough, you get enough silver out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, we talked about that yesterday with chocolate. How they were shaving off chocolate in the candy bars, making them smaller. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how the governments would, or the Caesars of the world would make their.
Yeah, but it could just be any Joe Blow down the street that did it,
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That thought had never occurred.
So that's and I think the nickels are. They're smooth. They're smooth because it really doesn't matter. But that is why the historical background for why the quarter is reached.
It's interesting because turns out right now, nickel is worth. It's a commodity, and nickels, are they still made out of nickel?
No, they're not made out of nickel. We've just kept the name.
Oh.
Yeah. Kind of like the shekel. It's not made out of silver, and it doesn't weigh whatever it is. I think it's. I don't remember what a shekel was. It's
because I'm stuck on the first financial crisis. The guy that sort of called that crisis, like in that movie, in the Big Short, and Michael Lewis's books about it. That guy, his thing at the end of that book was invest in nickels because there's enough nickel in them right now that they're worth more than a nickel. And it must have.
That could be.
It might just be up to a certain year.
I don't claim knowledge on that. I do know that periodically governments find that they have to change. When the price of things change, they have to periodically say, okay, people are starting to melt the coins. Let's change the metals that go in.
Okay. Is there any advantage to banks? Like as a person in credit unions, are you like, why are people still using banks and not all credit unions? Why are banks succeeding so well when, in my opinion, a better version exists in credit unions? Well,
I work for the credit union industry, so I don't want to say too much. But credit unions exist to serve consumers.
Right.
So there are people other than consumers that use financial institutions. So if you're a business, that might be a reason why you're using a bank.
Oh, okay.
There's also a wide variety of services that credit unions and banks offer. Credit unions are small community-based organizations. Bank of America has branches all over the country. Right. So if you value wherever you go, there's a branch. Banks might have a little advantage on that. But the main reason is inertia. Well, I can say this as a credit union person. Credit unions might need to do a better job of marketing themselves, of advertising themselves, of letting people know, look, we have a great deal. And you
I feel like they're getting more and more, and maybe I'm wrong, but my perception is they're growing.
Yeah,
they used to seem like they were just for military or just for specific state workers, and now it feels like almost anybody can go into use a credit union.
Yeah, in 1910, credit unions were 0% of the market.
0%.
Yeah, because they didn't exist.
Oh, okay.
The first one is from 1908, but rounding to zero. By now, it's gone up on a straight line, and it's about somewhere between 7 and 9%, depending on the definition that you use. So it's had a steady increase over time. So it is growing, but it's still a small player. And to a large extent, I would argue it's because of inertia. That people grow up with their parents use a bank. Well, they use a bank too.
Yeah, it's because they don't seem very different to me. I feel like, I don't know, like you said, it's like it's driven by more towards people than it is towards a corporate sort of entity. And it feels like I just don't trust corporate state, and I'm more, but my credit union, I'm with TrueLiant, and I feel like I'm starting to see them everywhere, like a regular bank,
Well, they are both operating in the same space. And they both try to offer the same goods and services, and they essentially compete with one another. So if one comes up with an innovation and does better, well, the other side will say, oh, we are going to offer that to our customers too. So.
Right. Do the credit unions charge you to cash a check in their account if you don't have an account there?
Well, there's 5,000 credit unions. There's 5,000 banks. They each have different pricing, but by and large, the evidence implies that credit unions offer slightly lower interest rates on loans, slightly higher interest rates on deposits, and slightly lower fees. Ultimately, they are institutions. They with people. They have to pay the electricity bill, so they do a better deal for consumers. But they do have to keep the lights on. So they are not going to give you loans without asking for the money back. They are not going to provide you services that cost a lot to provide at the price of zero to you. Nor should they.
Right. Has the banking industry ever tried to lure you away from the credit union industry? Like, we'll pay you more to come do your thing for us?
Well, life is interesting in that it takes many ways. And
so is it a moral decision for you, or a virtue, or an ideal decision that's why you're going to stay here versus there?
I like what I do. I've been working in the credit union space for 20 years.
Right.
So I have a lot of knowledge that I have developed that is credit union specific.
Okay.
So what I have found is, younger people can't change jobs, and they should do whatever is best for them. But as you get older, you get set in your ways, and I'm not gonna say that if you offered me $1 million a year, I wouldn't change lines of work.
Right.
But I'm happy in the line of work that I am, and
That's great. I'm assume the percentage of people that can say that statement is low. I'm happy in what I do for a living.
Well, it's called work for a reason.
Right. Right. It's hard to enjoy even when you totally love something all the time.
I like my work a lot.
Right.
But I do know that a lot of people are not as fortunate.
It's funny. We have a theory, or JD, one of our regular guests, has a theory. Because I talk about it, like, I read about all this money. He's like, well, how much money you have? And I'm like, spend it all on books. And so and he's like, yes, my economics teacher in college drove like a '83 Honda. You know what I mean? Like, they have all this knowledge of money, but they don't have the money.
Now, was that in 1985 that he drove an 83?
Yeah. So it's like the economist in the room, like when you're in there with Neil and Daniel, that he's the broke one. You know what I mean? And those two who aren't economists have the money. So is that generally a thing you've seen that translates? Like, the people that have studied money aren't necessarily making money off of it?
I don't know about that.
Okay.
I mean, there are many definitions of success, and there are many things that people value, and there are many paths to success. I think, on average, education and training helps people and makes them more successful. So I do think that education, particularly in money, financial literacy, makes people better off. But that is not to say that it's a one-to-one correlation between being successful in life and having
Financial knowledge.
and having financial knowledge, or having developed, having been trained in economics or finance. I mean, we have wasoodles of creative people who come up with great ideas. That, okay, it's a great idea for a product or service that people want. You make lots of money, and they hire their economists and their finance people and their accountants.
Okay. That makes sense. So, as far as philosophy goes, going back to Stoicism, he doesn't talk almost all about money and how he feels about money. He talks about success and not wanting like that adoration from other people or being a star or whatever. But he doesn't really. I can't think
Well,
where
he's
they
the
address
emperor.
his money. So he has all of it.
Yeah, he doesn't have to worry about it. I mean, it's there's. I love history. I love learning about history, but you have to always keep things in perspective. The Roman society and Roman state are roots of who we are. There's a lot to be learned from them, but ultimately, to a large extent, what the Roman society and nobility were an exploitative military.
They were the winners.
System where they didn't work. They simply run the military. So to him, the taxes are flowing in from the empire. He's trying to live the good life, and I think Marcus Aurelius is one of the best emperors in Roman history. I think most people agree. He probably was a great guy. He probably was a great emperor. But the reason he's not speaking about money is that he wasn't worried about it.
Right. Yes.
He had a completely. I mean, I think he was a good guy. You can be a good guy. There's the saying of, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely, he's probably an exception to the rule, but he still was the emperor. So that's why he's not speaking about money. And there are some people. Another philosopher that I love is Aristotle, and sometimes he gets criticized because of. Well, ultimately, because he was a free guy in a slave-owning society. And, he was born in it. It was not that he chose it.
Right.
But Aristotle's relationship with money is a little like Marcus Aurelius because, well, he didn't need to worry about it.
Right. Do we have any great philosophers that did have to worry about it? And that talked about money in that way?
I don't know. I'm not a philosophy expert.
Right, but just
but I think the first philosopher that I'm aware of, the first person who's reputed as a philosopher, who thought a lot about money, is David Hume.
That's a name I know, but I can't remember what his thing was.
Yeah, David Hume is fascinating. I love David Hume in the 1700s. And he is the foundation of basically the modern English way of thought, of a school of thought called empiricism. But again, I would argue that he's a descendant of Aristotle. I mean, throughout history, we've had various schools of thoughts, but some of them are like daughters or mothers of each other.
Right.
So in Greek times, we had Platonism and we had Aristotelianism. One was more, looking at the stars. The other one was more worrying about life on Earth. And there's ways in which that continues. And for all my philosophy friends out there, they're probably hating the oversimplifications that I'm doing. But
you're talking to the dumbest guy in the room, so keep simplifying.
But David Hume is a guy that I would recommend you read.
I will.
Aristotle is another one. But David Hume is probably the first philosopher to think a lot about money. Obviously, there were others earlier, blah, blah, blah. But if you are interested in Stoicism, I might recommend you try another guy called Epictetus, which I haven't read him, and I don't know his personal background, but I suspect that he might be better for you than Marcus Aurelius, even though Marcus Aurelius is great, in that I suspect that Epictetus wasn't rich.
Right.
So Economist. So I believe that money is a great invention in society that greases daily life. If we didn't have money, life would be more difficult because you could have to, you might be a bread maker, I might be a chicken maker, and then we might have to figure out, okay, what's the exchange rate between chickens and bread? And then when you went next door to the table maker, okay, how many tables does the guy need? Eventually, you could end up saying, okay, instead of trading what I make, let's just find some intermediate thing that we all trade in that everybody accepts readily. So I tend to focus on money as a way to ease our daily lives, as opposed that, and you can also use it for saving for the future instead of focusing on wealth, which is what people who say they don't like money, they are not saying I dislike the function that green pieces of paper serve. What they are talking about is I dislike the level of inequality in society in terms of wealth, because money can be used to mean wealth or the green pieces of paper. So I tend to say, okay, let's differentiate those things.
Yeah, and there's a thing with money where it will, at some point, you will trade your ideals for money. You know what I mean? You'll sacrifice your beliefs and your rights. Most of us will.
Where can I go do that?
Right. Well,
I'm ready to do that right now.
I don't think you can directly go like, all right, I no longer believe in this if you give me $100.
That's my
but
homeless sign.
I think that we will
I'm ready to
over
sacrifice
time.
my beliefs for money.
I think over time we will bend our beliefs and what's important to us and our ideals to profit.
I think some people do and some people don't.
Right.
And that's the people that do is the people that we tend to say they're immoral and they are not people who people look up to, and there are people who bend their life and their worth for money less, and these are the people that a lot of people find admirable. Now, there's a wide variety of people out there. There are people who admire people who will push grandma off the train to get ahead in life. So, we
don't want to get into talking about Donald Trump. Didn't he do that once? Didn't he do that, push his grandmother off a train?
The politics.
Yeah, I know.
Here they come.
Yes. How much do you think? You know how like a baseball card, like a rookie card, it was like it's worth 5 cents at the time, and now it's worth $1 million. How much do you think you could sell Jesus for now, as opposed to back then?
Inflation? You
yeah,
mean?
with inflation, like you were saying, how much? If you were to change inflation-wise, how much would they have to sell him for?
I mean, I was looking up the shekel, and it's 0.29. It's 29 cents per shekel now. So,
Dude, Christianity's $1 billion industry, isn't it?
Yeah, but probably
At least.
Yes.
At least one.